Io ando. Aló. Hello guys. Hello. Good morning sir. ಯಾರು ಕಾಣ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಕ್ಯಾಮ್ರಾ ಬರ್ತೈತೆ.
ರಾವಲ್ಲ
ಮೈಕ್ರೋಫೋನ್ ಫ್ಲೋ.
guys, can you able to hear me?
Yes sir.
Okay. Please do one thing. I'll be making the WhatsApp group call so that audio will be clear. Who are all attended here? Um, fine. Sushma, are you there? Sushma HP. Sushma. Sushma, can you able to hear me? What about Mayuri? Mayuri, can you able to hear
Yes,
me?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Sushma, what is your last number? Last number. Your phone number. Last number.
546.
546, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll be making the WhatsApp group call so that audio will be clear, somewhat better.
Okay.
Okay. Who are all connected as of now? Yeah, now can you able to hear me? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes.
Rahul connected, Vidya Shankar connected. and 646 last number connected.
Rahul.
Okay, guys, shall we start?
Yes.
Is there any audio issue from my side? Please confirm. Guys, is there any audio issue from my side? Please confirm.
No.
Okay, fine. Please use the chat window to inform anything. Okay. Okay. Can you able to see my screen clearly?
Mm.
Can you able to see my screen clearly?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Uh, I might change the settings. Video to high definition. Receiver's resolution. Fine. Audio. Fine. So next concept is HTTP session. HTTP session. So there is a concept called HTTP session in the servlets. The HTTP session object, it is used for session management. For the session management, what is a session? Once the user opens a web browser until he closes, that is what we are calling a session. Once a user opens a web page or web browser until he closes that browser, that is what we are calling the session of that user. Session of that user. By using HTTP session object, we can able to manage the session. By using HTTP session object, we can able to manage the session of a user. Now, a session contains information that is specific to a particular user. A session contains information that is specific to a particular user. That means it is about the information of a user that currently using that session, means currently using that web browser. Now, once the user opens a web browser until he closes, that is what we are calling a session of that user. Session of that user. Across the whole application, when a user enters into a website or any online application for the first time, HTTP session it is obtained via this method: request object get session. request dot get session, request dot get session. Now what happens? The user will be assigned with one unique ID. The user will be assigned with one unique ID to identify his session, to identify his session. Now that unique ID can be stored inside a cookie or in a request parameter. Whatever the unique ID that has been given to the user to identify his session, that unique ID can be stored into a cookie or into a request parameter. Now, the next point about HTTP session is the HTTP session object stays alive until it has not been used for more than the timeout value specified in the tag in the deployment descriptor file in the web.xml. Okay, if I don't specify in the web.xml, by default the timeout will be 30 minutes. By default the timeout will be 30 minutes. That means the HTTP session object stays alive until it has not been, means if I say some time limit, if I say some time limit, if it is not used, if it is not used for more than that timeout value specified in the deployment descriptor file, web.xml file, then it is going to remove until the specified time. Until the specified time, it will be there. Until the specified time, that HTTP session object will be alive. If I don't specify that time, if I don't specify that timeout, what happens? By default the timeout value will be is 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Now what that means? This means when the user doesn't visit the web application time specified, the session is destroyed by the servlet container. The servlet container only creating this object. That object will be destroyed by the servlet container if the user doesn't visit that web application or web application or website, web application or website in the specified time, in a specified time. Now what happens next? The subsequent request. So user made another request. Assume that user made another request. The subsequent request will not be served from this session anymore because that session is ended. The subsequent request will not be served from that session anymore. The servlet container will be creating another new session, another new HTTP session object. The servlet container will be creating another new session object. Now, how we can able to create the HTTP session object? How we can able to create the HTTP session object? For example, in the do post, here HTTP session. So what is this HTTP session? It is the interface. HTTP session. You can observe here HTTP session. HTTP session. HTTP session is the interface. HTTP session is the interface. Now we are creating the object for that. That object we are assigning to session. That object we are assigning to session. How we are making the object? That is by using a request. Where is request? This is the request. HTTP servlet request. HTTP servlet request. What is HTTP servlet request? Please observe. HTTP servlet request also is an interface. Now, somewhat we are
Somewhat
creating
we are
the
creating the
object.
object.
Somewhat we are creating
Somewhat
the
we are
object
creating the
for this.
object for this.
Request dot get session. Request dot get session. We cannot able to create directly object to the interface by extending or implementing. By implementing that interface, the implemented class, by using the implemented class, we are creating the object. That object we are assigning to session. That object we are assigning to session. That is how we are getting this session object. That is how we are getting the session object. So we are not worrying about these things. Actually, these things internally taken care by the servlet container itself, creating object of the HTTP session object that will be taken care internally by the servlet container. We don't have to worry about that. Simply you can use this syntax. How to create the HTTP session object? HTTP session by using a request. We can call this method get a session. There are so many methods are available inside the HTTP servlet request. One of them it is get session. Get session. Now we can store the user information. We can store the user information into the session object by using set attribute. We can store the information into the session object. This object by using set attribute method. And then later, whenever we needed this information, we can fetch that information from the session object. Whenever we need that information, we can fetch that information from the session object. So this is the way how we can store the information in the session. What are the steps? We can store the information, user information, into the session object by using set attribute method. Now, after that, whenever I needed that information can be fetched from the session object. So this is the way to store the information in the session object. So for our example, we'll be storing username, email ID, and user age. Now, by using this, by using this, totally three attribute, three attributes we are storing inside the session object. What are that? What are that? Name, mail ID, and age. Name, mail ID, and age. Uname means username, then user email ID and user age. Three attribute, three attribute information, three attribute information we are storing inside the session object. Now, carefully observe here. What is this? Session object dot set attribute. Session object dot set attribute. Two parameters it is accepting. Set attribute two parameters. First parameter is the attribute name. First parameter is the attribute name. Second parameter is the attribute value. This is the attribute name, comma. This is the attribute value. Then here uname, whatever we have given uname, that is attribute name. Then attribute value will be
Value will be
whatever the value we
whatever
have
the
given
value I
here,
have given here.
that is the value.
That is the value.
Then
Then,
like that,
like that,
another two
another
attributes
two
we are
attributes
storing.
we are storing.
U email ID
You email ID,
attribute name,
attribute
then
name, then
value.
value.
U email
You
ID
email
value,
ID value.
then
Then
UH U value.
U value.
UH,
UH,
it is the
it is
attribute
the
name,
attribute name.
then
Then
it is the
it is
value
the value
for
for
UH attribute.
UH attribute.
So what we are
So
achieving
what we
here?
are achieving here?
We are storing the
We are storing the
information to the
information to
session
the
object by
session
using
object by using
set attribute
set
method.
attribute method.
Why we are doing
Why we
this?
are doing this?
Because
Because
later we need
later
this
we need this
information,
information.
then we can fetch
Then we
this
can fetch this
information from
information
the session
from the
object.
session object.
This is the
This is
way to
the
store
way
the
to store the
information into the
information
session
into the
object.
session object.
How to retrieve
How to
the
retrieve
values
the
from the
values
session
from the
object?
session object.
Earlier we have used
We have
set
used
attribute.
set
Now
attribute.
we'll be using
Now
the
we'll be using
get
the
attribute. Get attribute method of the HTTP
HTTP
session interface.
session interface.
Here we are going to fetch the
To fetch the
attribute values
values
using
using
attribute names,
attribute names.
using just
Using
attribute
just
names.
attribute names.
So string
String
username I'm creating,
username I'm creating.
session
Session
object, from the session
from the
object
session
I'm getting
object
the
I'm getting the
attribute value by using
value by using
attribute name
the attribute
uname.
name uname.
Now the return value will
Value
be in the
will
form of
be in the form
object.
of object.
Get attribute return
Attribute
value in the
return
form of
value in the
object.
form of
We need
object.
to
We do
downcast to the
downcast
string.
to
Then
the
only
string.
we can able to
Only we
store
can able
inside
to
the
store
string.
inside the
That
string.
is why I'm doing the
That is why
downcasting
I'm
here.
doing the downcasting here.
Get attribute method return type is
Method
object
return
type,
type is object type.
object type.
Object type.
Now that should be converted to the string type.
String
Then only
type.
we can
Then
store to
only we
the
can store to
string.
the string.
Like that, we are retrieving other true attribute values by using attribute names by using get attribute method of the HTTP session interface. Earlier, we have stored this information by using session.setAttribute. Now we are retrieving those information from the session object by using getAttribute method of the HTTP session interface. Here, just we are specifying the attribute names. Attribute names. Whatever we have specified, attribute names. Now, some of the methods are there in the HTTP session interface. These are all the important methods. Public void set attribute, it is taking two arguments: string name, object to value. String name, object to value. So what it is doing, binds the object with the name and stores the name value pair as an attribute of the HTTP session object. We have seen this set attribute. One is string name, another one is object value. Binds the object with a name and stores value, name and value as a pair and in the form of attribute in the HTTP session object. If an attribute already exists, then this method replaces the existing attributes. That means if already one attribute is there with the name and value, then this method will be replacing the existing attributes. Simple. Then get attribute. Carefully observe, get attribute method is the objective type, return type is objective type. That is why I need to downcast or I need to convert to the string type. Then only we can able to store that inside the string variable. It is accepting one string as the argument. What it is returning? Returns the string object specified in the parameter. Returns the string object specified in the parameter from the session object. If assume that no object is found for the specified attribute, then it is going to return the null. Finally, because of the return type is objective type, whenever you are trying to store inside the string, you should downcast to the string type, then only you can store inside the string. Now it is for enumeration purpose. Public enumeration. Return type itself is enumeration. Get attribute names. Get attribute names. What it is doing? Returns an enumeration means a set of enumeration that contains the name of all the objects that are bound as attributes to that session object. Simply it is going to return in the form of enumeration. Simply it is going to get the all the objects that are specified, all the objects that are specified to that session object. That means the attributes, whatever the attributes is there for that session object, that will be returned in the form of enumeration. You can simply consider it as the constants in the form of constants enumeration. Simply it is going to return the names of the objects. Then another method, remove attribute. It is taking string as the argument, remove attribute. Now this method we are going to use to remove any of the attribute from the session object. We are going to use this to remove any of the attribute from the session object. Now we know this, set a max inactive interval. This is the method. Then it is taking int as the value. What it is going to do? Set the session inactivity time in seconds. How long a session remains active since the last request received from the client. Now, after this time interval, the session is going to expire. Then, if another request comes from the user, The web container will be creating a new session object. Now we'll see the program. Come to the Eclipse. HTTP session, one project I have already created. Open that project, HTTP session, expand that node. Now, please observe what are the things I have. Simple index.html file I have. Simple index.html file I have. I created one simple index.html file. This is the HTML file. Now, this is one simple form. Action is equal to servlet1. It is going to call the servlet1. Whenever I click on the submit, it is going to call the servlet1. Now, I have two fields, username, password. Username and password field I have. Next, I have one button. Next, I have one button, submit button. Then, now copy this content, servlet1, create servlet1 inside the src folder. Inside the src folder, create one package called com.optic. Inside that package, you can able to create the servlet1. How you can able to create the servlet1? Here, first create the package com.aptech. Then you should only override. You should only override. Please observe this servlet1. Which method I have overridden? Only do get method I have overridden. Do get method. Do get method you can override. Now, see, this statement is mandatory. This statement is mandatory if you are using the Google Chrome. If your default browser is the Google Chrome. If it is Internet Explorer, that is fine. But if it is Google Chrome, this statement is mandatory. Otherwise, you'll be getting different, means the tags will be not working properly. Okay, by default Chrome will be considering it as a text. By default Chrome browser will be considering this as a text. That is why we should we should inform to the Google Chrome browser this is text or HTML. Okay, then only it will work fine. Then I'm getting the print writer. Print writer pw writer is equal to response dot get writer. Response dot get writer. Then carefully observe. String name is equal to request dot get parameter. I'm trying to read the parameter username, storing inside the name password. Request dot get parameter user password, storing inside the password. Simply I'm going to print. Simply I'm going to print. So this output will be we can able to see on the web browser. We can able to see on the web page. Print hello name, whatever the name I have supplied. Then print the password, whatever the password I have given, that password will be displayed. Now we are creating the session object. Now we are creating the session object here. How to create the session object? HTTP session. This is the interface. Then session variable. Request dot get session. Inside the request object, we are storing the attributes. Information we are storing inside the request object. Now I'm calling get session. Now I'm calling the get session method. Now the servlet web container, it is going to create the HTTP session object for us. Then what we are doing inside the request object, inside the request object, we are storing the information. We are storing the information. We are storing the information. How we are storing the information? We are calling the get session method. Now totally this object is assigned to session. Now by using the session object, by using the session object, we are calling the set attribute method. Now we are calling the set attribute method. This is the attribute name, this is the attribute value. Attribute name, attribute value. Now please observe pwriter dot print anchor tag. I'm using the anchor tag. This is the hyperlink. href. I'm making a call to Servlet 2. I'm making a call to Servlet 2. Now this is the text internally linked to Servlet 2. If I click on this link, see this view details will be coming in the blue color with the link. If I click on this link, directly it is going to call the Servlet 2. Then we are closing the print writer. Then all these code I'm keeping inside that, right? If there any exception occurs, I'm keeping the exception class to handle the exception. Now copy this Servlet 2, create the Servlet 2. This is the Servlet 2. Here also you should override only do get, and you should compulsory include this statement response dot get content type text or HTML if you're using the Google Chrome browser. Now print writer, once again I'm creating the print writer object. Then we are assigning the response dot get writer. Response object we are assigning to pwriter. Then what we are doing, we are creating the HTTP session object. Once again, we are creating the HTTP session object, but this time, observe carefully, we don't need another session. We don't need another session. Whatever the session is already there, that session only we are using. That session only we are using. Already one session is there. That session only we are using inside the select 2 as well. Now simply what I'm doing here, inside the request object, already we have two attributes. Already we have two attributes. So I'm retrieving that attribute by using get attribute. I'm calling get attribute method on the session object. How we are retrieving here, this is the name of the attribute. By using name of the attribute, we are retrieving that attribute values. The retrieved attribute values we are storing inside the string. Before storing inside the string, we need to downcast or convert to the string, then only you can store inside the string. Now, whatever the values you have retrieved, those values you are printing. Currently, we are in the Servlet 2. In the Servlet 2 also, the same session is used. So, this is for the same user, same session, same user, same session. Even two servlets are there. Even two servlets are there for the same user, same session. It is not going to create another session. Why? Because whatever I have mentioned here, request dot get session false. What that means? Request dot get session boolean returns the current HTTP session associated with this request, or that means whatever the current HTTP session is there, that will be returning. If there is no current session, if there is no current session and create is true, if there is no current session, if the create is true, returns a new session. If the create is false, whatever we are doing here, this one, false. If the create is false, argument is false. Okay. If the argument is false and the request has no valid HTTP session, this method returns null. But in this case, we have the session, valid session we have, valid HTTP session we have. It is going to return the previous session only. Whatever session we have used for the Servlet 1, the same session it is going to use in the Servlet 2. For the same user, same session, even though two servlets are there. The same I'm trying to print name and password. All these things I'm keeping inside the try block. Then corresponding catch block I'm developing. Now try to execute the index.html. Right click, run as, run on server. Now simply click on finish. Now username, I'll be giving Vijay. Password, I'll be giving something like admin. In observe password, we have set the field, means in the index.html input type is equal to password. That is why we are getting in the form of dots. It is hidden. Now click on submit. If I click on submit, what happens? If I click on submit, it is going to call the servlet one. It is going to call the servlet one. Now In the Servlet one, we have this message, hello username, means name, username, hello Vijay, then your password is admin. In the Servlet one, observe carefully, hello name, then your password is the password. Then carefully observe what I'm trying to do. Creating the session object by calling the set attribute method of the session object. I'm storing the information inside the session object, uname, upass. This is the name for the attribute. This is the value for the attribute, name and password. Immediately, what I'm doing here, I'm calling the selector2. I'm calling the selector2 by using anchor tag. I'm calling the selector2. Now, immediately the control goes to selector2. This text will be linked to the selector2. What happens if I click on this link? If I click on this hyperlink, it is going to call the selector2. It is going to call the selector2. Now, in the selector2, what we are doing? Once again, we are trying to create the HTTP session object, but the session is already there. Simply the current session is going to assign to the current object, current session object. Already whatever the session object is there, that is assigning with session. It is not going to create the new session. It is not going to create the new session. It is going to use the same session. The same session is going to assign to the session. The same session object is going to assign to the session. Now we are retrieving the values that is inside the current session object. Now we are retrieving the name, username, storing inside the my name. We are retrieving the password, you password, storing inside the my password. Then we are printing the same name plus my name, then password plus password. Then we are closing the print writer. Here, same user, two servlets, only one HTTP session object. Here, initially, we are making a request to servlet 1, then we are making a request to servlet 2. But a session is maintained for the user, only one session, only one session, even though we are making a request to two servlets, servlet 1 and servlet 2. Only one session object is maintained, not the multiple session object, only one session object. Now, if you click on this view details, if you click on this view details, immediately it is going to call the servlet 2. In the servlet 2, we know what we are doing. We are retrieving whatever there inside the current session object, name and password. This is the servlet 2. The same session, but two requests. Servlet 1, servlet 2. But only one user. Same session object is maintained. Same session object is maintained. How we are maintaining? By using the HTTP session object. HTTP session object. So this is about HTTP session. Understood this one? Shall we move on to next concept?
Yes, sir.
Fine. So next concept is filters. Why do we need filters? Why do we need filters? Now, in case of filters, we'll be using before execution, before executing anything, or after executing anything, or both. We can use the filters. We can use the filters before executing something, after executing something, or both. For example, before calling servlet, I want to execute something. Before executing the servlet, before calling the servlet, I want to execute something. Or after executing the servlet, I want to execute something. Or in both the cases. In that cases, we can able to use the filters. Before executing something, after executing something, or in both the cases, we can use the filters. How we are using the filter? We will be assigning the filter to the particular resource. In this case, consider that resource as servlet. We are assigning the filter to the resource. In this case, we'll be assigning the filter to servlet. Now, practically we can able to see this. Come to the servlet's filters. Servlet filters. Servlet filters. One project I have created. Servlet's filters. A new project we should create. A new dynamic web project we need to create. Servlet filters. There, what I'm trying to do. Carefully observe. Inside the web content. Inside the web content. Inside the web content, I have two files, test1.html, test2.jsp. As of now, we don't want to worry about this. What you can do is Java resources, src, create initially three servlets. Create three servlets. Servlet 1, which method you have to override? Do get method you have to override. Do get method. Now simply keep one SOP statement system.out.println from servlet 1. Then get the print writer object, print writer, response.getWriter. Then print that response to the browser, out.println from servlet 1. Then you can include the line break. This is for the servlet 1. Like that, create other two servlets. Simply create three servlets. This is servlet 2. Here also, I'm keeping SOP, getting the print writer object, then printing the response back to the browser from servlet 2, then giving the line break. Likewise, another servlet, servlet 3. Here also, SOP, print writer object, printing the response back to the browser. Now, if I simply call servlet 1, what happens? If I simply call servlet 1, we'll get from servlet 1. That's it. Let me delete this filter 1. Now we don't have the filter. If I simply run this, what is the output? Right click, run as, run on server. Click finish, restart the server. What we are getting? 404, file not found. Why? Here in the deployment descriptor, we have the mapping web.xml. See, filter got mapped. Filter got mapped. So what you can do is, as of now, what I'll do in the deployment descriptor already some code has been generated. Why? Because I have created the filter. That is why I'm removing those. Save it. Now, now try to restart. Run on server. Finish. Restart the server. So what we are getting here? Simply I'm getting the output. This is the SOP output from Servlet. This is the out.println output from Servlet 1. Servlet 1. Assume that before calling this Servlet 1, I need to execute something. And after executing this Servlet 1, I need to execute something. In that case, we will be using the filters. We will be using the filters. How to use the filters? How to use the filters? Here, what you can able to do is select the package, right click, new filter. Once again, select the package, com.object, right click, new filter. Now, class name, what is the class name we are specifying? You can give filter 1. You can give filter 1, click on next. Now what you can do here, one URL filter mappings will be generated. Select that, edit. Now what you can do, one window will be appearing, edit filter mapping. Click on the servlet, click on the servlet. Here, whatever the servlets are available, it will be displaying those servlets. Now I'll be selecting servlet 1, then click on OK. Servlet 1, click on OK. Now you can click on finish. Now you can click on finish. In my case, I have already filter. Now, after you click on finish, you'll get this file, filter 1. Now by default, for filters also, no argument constructor will be there. Server is creating object to filter. Server server is creating the object to filter also by using reflection API concept. By using reflection API concept. By default, it is also calling the no argument constructor. That is why no argument constructor is mandatory. No argument constructor is mandatory. Now we know very well about auto load on startup. We have seen this earlier. Auto load on startup. Whenever the server is starting, at that time this will be loaded. Every filter is having auto load on startup. Whenever the server is starting, at that time this will be loaded. Now this is the constructor. Inside the constructor, I'm deleting the default code. I'm keeping this SOP filter one, no argument constructor. And destroy method also we have. Deleting the default code, I'm keeping the system.out.println filter one destroy. Then it will be generating one do filter method. Do filter method. Now whatever that supposed to be executed before the resource execution, you can keep that before this statement. Whatever the resource that will be executed, that statement you can keep before this statement. Whatever the resource, whatever the resource, that resource will be executing before will be executing. Whatever the resource, assume that here we are giving the resource as servlet 1. Before executing servlet 1, before executing servlet 1, I need to execute this one. I need to execute this filter. Filter 1, do filter, started. Then same thing, I'm trying to print to the browser. This will be displayed in the server. This will be displayed in the web browser. And then I'm giving the line break. Then after printing the resource, after executing the resource, see whatever we have printed, this is before pre execution of the resource. After execution of the resource, see when this statement will be called, it will be calling the resource. Then after execution of the resource, this statement will be executed. These statements: filter 1 do filter end, filter 1 do filter end. Now carefully observe the deployment descriptor. In the deployment descriptor, we need to give the mapping. In the deployment descriptor, we need to give the mapping. What is that mapping? See, this one will be automatically done while you are creating the filter. Don't worry about that. In this case, what I'm trying to do, filter. So try to keep this. Observe. This is the code that will be automatically generated. Now carefully observe. As of now, we have only select one. How it is going to map? See, filter name that is mapped to select one. We don't want to bother about this. Don't worry about this. As of now, as of now, we are mapping the filter one to the select one. Name of the filter, filter one. Then, for which resource we are mapping? For the select one resource, we are mapping that filter. Save it. Come to the select one. Try to execute the select one. Right click, run as, run on server. Click on finish. Restart the server. Now, please observe the output. Console also observe. Web browser also observe. Initially, Before executing the resource, we are executing the filter. That means here, initially for the filters also, for the filters also, server is creating the object. That is why we are getting this constructor init method. Constructor init method. So filter object has been created. Then before executing the resource, this is the resource. Before executing the resource, we are executing the filter. Filter 1 do filter started, then resource. After that, we are printing filter 1 do filter end after executing the resource. After executing the resource. And in the browser also we can see filter 1 do filter started, then the resource, then only filter 1 do filter end. What we are trying to achieve here, filters are used for if you want to execute anything before the resource, or if you want to execute anything after the execution of the resource, or both the cases, in this case we are considering our resource as servlet. If something needs to be executed before calling the servlet, if something needs to be executed after execution of the servlet, or in both the cases, we can able to use the filter. Now the same filter we can assign to any number of servlets. For example, the same servlet for the sorry, the same filter we can able to assign to any number of servlets. Here, currently we are assigned filter 1 to servlet 1 resource. The same filter 1 we can assign to servlet 2 also. How? In the deployment descriptor, in the deployment descriptor, what you can do? Observe. Currently, initially we have assigned filter 1 to servlet 1. Now copy the same thing, paste here. Then you can modify. For the filter 1, I'm assigning second resource, that is servlet 2. For the same filter, for the filter 1 only, I'm assigning second resource, servlet 2. For the same filter, we can assign multiple resource. For the same filter, we are assigning multiple resource. Now what is the output? Save it. Now what you can do? Go to the servlet 2, execute. Right click, run as, run on server. Click on finish. Now observe the output. Initially, it is going to create filter object. It is going to create the filter object. This is the filter object. This is from the constructor. This is from the init method of the filter. Then, before executing the resource, we are executing something by using filter. Filter 1 do filter started. Then, after executing the resource, servlet 2, we are executing something by using filter. Filter 1 do filter end. Now, the same result you can able to see in the web browser. Same we are printing by using out object. By using print writer, we are printing the response back to the browser. This is the output. Same thing. Now what we are achieving? The same filter we are assigning to multiple resource. Here, earlier we have assigned the filter 1 to servlet 1. Now we are assigning the filter 1 to servlet 2. The same filter can be assigned to any number of resources. Any number of resources. It doesn't matter. Any number of resources. Likewise, I'll be assigning to the Servlet 3 as well. Go to the web.xml. Go to the web.xml. Simply what you can do. Here, filter 1, I'm assigning to Servlet 3. Here, one more thing you can observe. One more thing you can observe. Carefully observe. Select, sorry, filter mapping. Filter mapping. Here, filter name is filter 1. Then by using URL pattern, not the select name, by using URL pattern also, you can set the resource. By using URL pattern also, we can set the resource forward slash select 3. By using URL pattern also, possible. By using URL pattern also. Filter 1 is assigning to select 3 resource by using URL pattern. By using URL pattern in the web.xml file, deployment descriptor file. Save it. Come to the select 3. Click run as run on server. Click on finish. Restart the server. Now observe the output. We we are getting same result. Initially, it is going to create the filter object, constructor, init method. Then, before executing the select 3, before executing the select 3, before executing the select 3, we are getting filter 1 do filter started. Then we are getting select 3. This is the resource. Then after executing this resource, we are executing filter 1 do filter end. That means before executing some resource, filter is executed. After executing some resource, filter is executing. The same thing, the same thing we are printing in the web browser. The same thing we are printing in the web browser. So the main thing here it is, the same filter can be assigned to multiple resources. The same filter can be assigned to multiple resources. Here resources we are calling it as Servlet 1, Servlet 2. Not only Servlet, not only Servlet, we can also consider HTML file, JSP file also as a resource. HTML file and JSP file also as a resource. We can also assign filter to HTML. We can also assign filter to JSP file. We can also map.
Okay, sir.
Sorry.
Okay, sir.
Fine, fine. Please mute yourself. See, um, filter we can able to map to HTML file also. Filter we can able to map to JSP file also. See, we can consider select also resource, HTML also resource, JSP file also resource. Now create create HTML file. This is the HTML file I have, simple HTML file. See, before that, I need to show one more thing. We have also destroy method inside the filter. We have also destroy method inside the filter. How we can able to see that destroy method?
Stop the server. Then you will get test run method.
Yeah. So now this is the server. Now come to the servers tab. Come to the servers tab. Now this is the server. Currently it is started running. Right click on this server. Stop. Observe the console. Here filter 1 destroy. That filter 1 object got destroyed. Now create one HTML file. Create HTML file. Simple content. Hello, I am from test1.html. Inside web content, right click, create HTML file. The name of the file will be test1.html. Simply keep this content. Hello, I'm from test1.html. Line break. Now for this resource, I need to map the filter. For this resource, I need to map the filter. Come to the web.xml. Come to the web.xml. Here, what I'll do. Simply copy this URL, sorry, filter mapping. Filter mapping. Here, what you can do. Filter 1, I'm assigning to test 1. Test 1. Test, test 1. Test 1 dot HTML. Filter 1, I'm assigning to test1.html. Save it. Now, come to the browser. Sorry, come to the test1.html. Right click, run as, run on server. Finish. Now, please observe what we are getting. So, filter object got created. Now, I'm not printing anything here by using SOP. That is why I'm not getting in the console. I'm not getting anything in the console. Simply, before executing the resource, this is what we are getting. Filter 1 do filter started. After executing the resource, we are getting filter 1 do filter end. But here you can able to see. Here, filter 1 do filter started before executing the resource. Now I'm executing the resource. Hello, I'm from test1.html. Then after that, I'm executing filter 1 do filter end. After executing the resource, filter 1 to filter end is executing. Likewise, for JSP also, create the JSP file. Create the JSP file. Here I created the JSP file. This is a simple JSP file. Hello, I'm from JSP. Sorry. Hello, I'm from test2.jsp. Hello, I'm from test2.jsp. Line break. Then we are printing something. Then we are printing something. So this statement will be visible on the console on the server. Hello, I'm from test2.jsp. Using SOP. Now we should map this resource with the filter. How we are mapping that? Go to the web.xml. Go to the web.xml. Then copy this filter mapping. Filter mapping. Then paste here. For the filter one, I'm assigning test2.jsp. Save it. Come to the test2.jsp. Right click, run as, run on server. Click on finish. Restart the server. Now we can able to see creating the filter object. Then before executing the resource, we're executing filter. Filter one do filter started. Then executing the resource. Then filter one do filter end. The same thing you can See, in the web browser, the same thing. Filter 1 to filter started, then resource, then at the end, filter is executing. Now I'll make some changes. Please observe. This filter mapping is there. See, anyway, this filter, this one I'm keeping. ಏನಮ್ಮ ಮೌ ಕ್ಲಾಸಲ್ಲಿ ಇದ್ದೀನಿ ಸುಮ್ಮನೆರಮ್ಮ. Okay, here what I'm trying to do. Here, fine. Here I'm keeping this filter, filter one. Okay. This is the filter class. Then what I'm trying to do. Select one is there, but I'm interchanging. Select two, then only select one, then here. Select three, then keep here, then select two is there. Servlet 2, Servlet 3 already we have. Okay, fine. Now observe. Come to the Servlet 1. Servlet 1. Try to execute. Run as run on server. Finish. Servlet 1 we are getting. So we can also actually we can also set the order. Okay, means in which order, like the mapping, this filter is mapped. So in that order only we can able to execute. But this is the basics, actually this is the basics of this filter, just the basics of filter. Next is actually we have something like some other advanced concepts are there regarding filter. This is the filter basic. So guys, have you understood this much today?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Fine. Okay, fine. We will continue tomorrow. Okay, fine. We'll
Okay,
continue.
sir.
Yeah.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day all. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, sir. Good night, sir.